Sorry.
All right, go ahead.
Alright, hello. So I'm going to be talking about molas and the Kuna culture in Panama. So the Kuna people are part of the San Blas Islands. They live on the San Blas Islands in a region in Panama, and it's filled with beautiful waters, and it's right next to the Caribbean Ocean. And there are about 365 islands in that area, and about 41 of them are inhabited. And each one has its own leader and school and subculture, but they all share the same traditions and the culture of the Kuna people. And the Kunas are indigenous to Latin America, and so they're originally from Panama and Colombia. So according to the Inter-American Journal, there are approximately 40,000 to 50,000 Kuna people that make their home in 51 villages, including 41 on islands and 10 just off the coast of the mainland. So depending on where you go, that's about a 30-minute to 2-hour boat ride to a different island that will immerse you in a completely different culture from the rest of Latin America. So I had the opportunity to spend a month in Panama a few years ago, and I lived on one of the islands, and I slept in hammocks and ate their food, and was able just to experience their culture and their way of life, which was simple, but also see the process it took to make their art, which is often complicated. So the Kuna Indians have an interesting way of life, and it's enriched by their art and handiwork called molas. So molas are brightly colored, and they're pieces of fabric sewn on top of one. This is one here. They often have nature scenes or geometric patterns, and there's 3D a little bit. They're raised in dimension. They're sold to tourists and worn as clothing, and they have symbolic importance as well. They're very important and unique to the Kuna culture. So being able to understand the multi-layered and multifaceted origins of other people's cultures helps us understand their values and their viewpoints, and especially their worldview, where they're coming from. So molas are part of the traditional dress of the Kuna people. Mola actually means blouse in Kuna, so a lot of women would wear them as tops, and then long fabric skirts called parumbas, and then long beaded bracelets called weenies that would go up to their elbows. They're used as tapestries and purses and tops, and they're hand embroidered, and they're made out of various fabrics, usually whatever's on hand at the time. And some women would disassemble them and make them into something else, just because things are limited sometimes. So now most people wear commercially made clothing, just t-shirts, but a lot of older women wear molas and the traditional outfit. The University of Oregon has a museum of Kuna history in which they noted that molas are an important reflection of a woman's skills and Kuna identity, so a shout out, if you will, to their heritage and to what's important to them. So this is a mola someone gave me, and as you can see, there are different layers of fabric here sewn together, and essentially they would cut through each one and then sew it back. So these are all layers of fabric that were piled on top of each other, and it creates a dimension-filled piece of art. And it takes a long time to do each stitch. They originated from the technique of body painting, just those patterns, and they eventually were painted onto fabric and then made into patterns and sewn together. Molas are part of the Kuna way of life, and they're things that they make and things that they wear, but they became a part of the tourist industry in the 1960s, and so now most people make them and sell them to tourists. The Kuna people are indigenous to Panama, and they have their own territory there called the Kuna Yala, but it's so beautiful, it's like a tourist spot. So a lot of cruises go through the San Blas Islands, and a lot of visitors stop at their villages, and so they sell them to them. They've been sold to tourists instead of just worn by the Kuna people for the past 60-ish years, and they've traveled home with people across the globe. So it's more than just a way to make money or even a thing to wear. Molas represent the unique culture of the Kuna people. They depict their values and their freedom, and they help raise awareness of their way of life, which helps preserve their way of life. Molas are also symbolic with the cultural freedom of the people, the Kuna people. They help preserve their way of life, like I said. Panama shares a lot of similarities with the Kuna people. They're in the same region and same area, but they're separated and they're distinct by the art that they make. And it points to their unique heritage and what's important to them. In 1925, shortly after Panama was separated from Colombia, they tried to absorb the Kuna people as well. And they did that by preventing the Kuna women from wearing their molas. And of course they rebelled, and there was a legal battle. but that eventually turned into the Kuna people having their own territory that was separate from them. So molas represent their freedom, their cultural uniqueness. They have more meaning than just decorations. They show the triumphs of the Kuna people and their history. So they seem simple enough, right? It's just a piece of fabric, but making and teaching molas has helped preserve the essence of the Kuna people. According to an anthropologist, Clifford Gertz, he said, culture is a socially constructed, historically transmitted pattern of symbols, meaning premises and rules. And a lot of times older people would make these molas and then teach their grandchildren and teach younger children and be able to tell them stories and to preserve their language. And it takes time, so they would, be sitting there for hours. And that has literally helped transmit their culture through other generations, making it strong and preserving it. It's given them a strong cultural identity. So as you can see, the art from Kunas are not just things to sell to passing tourists, but they're symbols of freedom and preservation. They're representations of the pride in supporting themselves and their beautiful region. And through the beauty of these molas, they're able to have a reliable income and preserve their culture and have tangible reminders of their heritage. So molas encompass it all. Thank you.